Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. We're just going to give folks a few more seconds to join us here from the waiting room. Thanks for being with us today. I think we can go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, good morning from wherever you're joining from, and welcome to our session today, Driving Optichannel Success Through Data-Driven Decision-Making. I'm Maria Bien, and I will be your moderator for the next hour. Whether you're joining us live or on demand, we appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be here with us. Today's session is very exciting. It's all about driving impact through orchestrated, data-driven, personalized marketing campaigns. I'm personally very excited about this topic because maybe like many of you, I have seen the evolution from sales rep and print to sales rep and digital to multi-channel to omni-channel. And now with the availability of the data that we have at our fingertips to personalize campaigns, we're talking Optichannel. In my day job, I lead an oncology brand at GSK. My background is 15 years in or adjacent to the pharmaceutical industry across functions such as health economics, analytics, operations, and marketing. I have seen Optichannel as a way of doing business, be a growth driver and a success factor for a variety of brands across primary care, specialty medicines, oncology, and vaccines, and at varying stages of the life cycle. Our conversation today will span strategy through to channel selection, enhancing personalization with data, and driving efficiency in our investments, which sounds like the holy grail. All of us want to be able to do it, but the question is how. And for that, I'm joined by my esteemed panelists today. We have Hemal Somaya, who is the Chief Strategy Officer of Pharma IQ, Pedro Aitzferrer, who is the Director of Enterprise Omnichannel Customer Experience at Replimune, and Angelica Aguirre, who is the Director of Integrated Experience Planning at Novartis. We're all here today representing our own opinions and experiences, and we do not represent those of our respective employers. So Hemal, Pedro, and Angelica, thank you all for being here today and for sharing your expertise with our audience. Before we get started, a quick reminder for all of you in the audience, you're welcome to participate. We would love to see your questions. Please submit your questions at any time using the chat Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We'll do our best to address the questions as we're discussing, and we'll have some time at the end as well. We're looking forward to a very lively conversation, and we hope that you leave with practical insights that you can take and apply to your day-to-day work. So with that, let's dive in. I'll begin by inviting each panelist to introduce themselves briefly and share what Optichannel excellence means to each of them. So Hemal, let's start with you, and then we'll go to Pedro and Angelica.
Lovely. Sounds great. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. Super excited about this discussion with the esteemed panel joining us. Hemal Somaya, lead up strategy here at Pharma IQ, about 15 years in pharmaceutical marketing space, launching several different brands, both on the US and the global side, across different therapeutic areas. Pharma IQ is the only Optichannel solution today in the pharmaceutical industry, connecting dots between real-world data, personalization, real-world deployment, as well as real-time measurement, leading up to lagging indicators of success, such as prescription lift and revenue lift. So super excited to share some insights in terms of what we do here, how we have implemented it across different clients, and where are we going next. Thank you again.
Thank you, Hemal. So I'll continue. My name is Pedro Aitzferrer. As mentioned by Maria, I work at Replimune. And Optichannel is an exceptional space to think about, right? Because I think we've all lived in the omnichannel space and we've tried to be everywhere for everyone, right? We've all been there, done that. There was a lot of excitement of being present in every single channel. The reality is that that's not how we establish ROI. That's not necessarily how we win. We have to meet the right customer in the right place at the right time with the right message. And doing that in every channel does not necessarily make sense. So the optimization of our channel selection is something that's incredibly important. And as many of you know, something I'm incredibly passionate about is how do we orchestrate experiences across functions that make a seamless experience for our customers, whether they're talking to medical affairs, commercial, market access, or even your corporate teams. That all requires choices. And those choices are exactly how we define strategy, right? Strategy is only strategy if you've chosen to do something and not something else. So in an Optichannel world, we constantly have to make those choices to optimize how we deliver our communications to our customers.
Thank you, Pedro. Hi, everyone. I'm Angelica, Director of Integrated Customer Experiences at Novartis, where I focus on creating meaningful connections across our cardiovascular portfolio. I've spent my career navigating the challenge of how to meet people where they are, whether that's a physician in their office, a patient in their living room, or a caregiver who's searching late at night for answers. For me, Optichannel isn't about choosing the right channel, it's about choosing the right moment and doing it in a way that feels less like marketing and more like understanding. That's what drives me, and I'm excited to dig into today's conversation.
Amazing. Thank you, all of you. What I heard from that we'll dive into is really, it's about precision. It's about the journey. It's about that deep insight that we all have as marketers, right? Because this is as much a strategic conversation as an executional one. And, it's not about doing more with less. It's about doing less with less and having more impact. So we'll talk about all of that as we progress. So Angelica, I'm going to start with you, and we're going to go back to the data, since Optichannel has data at its core. Can you talk about what kind of data you're seeing being leveraged for campaigns and how you think about building triggers maybe aligned to the journey you were just speaking about in your opening?
Sure, that's a great question to start with. So at Novartis, we're looking at a mix of traditional and emerging data signals to guide our campaigns. On the physician side, it might mean that we're looking at prescription data, EMR activity, or even field force feedback. That tells us where we may have some gaps in knowledge or even opportunities to deepen that engagement. And on the patient or caregiver side, we're layering in digital signals, things like content engagement, search intent, or even when a patient journey milestone might indicate they're ready for a different kind of support. When I think about building triggers, it's really about mapping those moments that matter. We're asking, where are people showing intent, those proxy behaviors? Where are they signaling an unmet need? How do we respond in a way that adds value rather than noise? Nobody wants extra noise in the market. And the opportunity is less about adding more triggers and more about making sure the ones we do have are meaningful, respectful, and create those better experiences. That's what really turns our data into a trust network.
I love that. Pedro, how about you?
I could not agree any more with what Angelica said, right? It is all those data sets. And something that she mentioned, whether we all call it slightly different things, is being very clear about what a true quality visit is. What is a visit that is actually signaling intent, desire to understand, whatever that experience that they're trying to achieve, but being very clear on what they are. Because if we make everything that happens on a website or on a hub and when I say hub, I mean like your MedInfo hubs or your market access patient support programs. If we make every single download a quality visit, then we're not establishing a true quality visit, right? We need to have those clear correlations between a digital behavior, and an expected outcome. That way, when we start our triggers program and we try to get the field involved and we try to get our teams to react to a specific behavior digitally, it can be done with full support rather than questioning the value of that trigger, right? Because the last thing we need is our teams questioning the value of our data.
That's right.
Absolutely. And I think, maybe pulling on this a little bit, it all goes back to the strategy and what you're trying to achieve, right? So your measurement depends on, for example, you were talking about the quality visits, like exactly what you want them to do from an action standpoint in that hub, on that website, in that engagement, which then ladders back to your strategic imperatives, which goes back to your strategy. So Hemal, maybe from your perspective, what specific methodologies or approaches have you found effective for measurable growth in the Optichannel space, and how might those approaches differ depending on therapeutic area, for instance?
I think that's a great question, right? So agree with everything Pedro and Angelica said. Gone are the days when we think about just spray and pray with our customer target audiences. It's all about that right moment of opportunity, but also personalization and real time, if you will, right? So when we think about a methodology that has worked well, that we've seen, brands implement and succeed with meaningful growth in terms of prescriptions and revenue lift, it's an element of connecting the dots where you identify these right moments of opportunities in an ongoing dynamic manner. And those moments can be defined based off of your brand strategic goals as well as your patient journey, right? Whether it's that right moment because a physician has diagnosed an eligible patient, whether it's the right moment because the physician, just attended your speaker program or, came to your ad board and now you want to continue a journey with them, or whether it's the right moment because of a quality visit, to Pedro's point, and you want to dig deeper with that physician to drive home not just deeper education, but truly adoption of the brand. So you have to take a step back, think about your brand strategic goals, identify those right moments of opportunities across your owned channels, across third party, activities, as well as across anything sort of your reps are doing, and start patching the dots together in a real-time manner. Now, once you have identified these right moments of opportunities, and once you understand that this is when you want to educate that physician, then that needs to flow into your deployment engine. If the two sit separate, then, you would identify these HCPs, but there's nothing you can do about it for the next 1 month or 3 months. So how do you plug the dots using technology in this day and age where those feed in an ongoing basis, and then you start deploying against these HCPs, and you don't want to spray and pray, so you want to deploy in a personalized manner. And when we think personalization, there's a lot of noise around affinity data, but how do you get to very accurate information about these HCPs without getting too creepy, without breaching any compliance barriers? But how do you truly understand an HCP as a consumer and as a person, and leverage that personalized data set to feed in again in a real-time manner that allows you to deploy to every customer wherever they are in that moment of opportunity. Now, once you've deployed in that personalized manner, the measurement side of it, Maria, to your point, is very critical. And when we think measurement, again, gone are the days where pharma was satisfied with, just leading indicators of success in terms of, hey, our engagement rates on emails went up from 5% to 10%. I think we've now gotten really sophisticated and are continuing to evolve towards the goal of, it's not just about those leading indicators of success, but how do you then look at post these engagements in a real-time dynamic manner, not doing just one marketing mix analysis at the end of the year or every 6 months, but truly on a weekly, monthly basis. Are you able to see the impact in terms of that prescription lift and revenue lift to truly go back to your leadership and to your agencies and, be able to say, hey, this is where we are going to double down and invest more. And this is where, it's just not working. Even if we are seeing engagements, it's not converting into prescription lift. So I would say connecting the dots more holistically in an automated real-time manner is what we've seen successfully sort of, deliver impactful results for brands. Now, when we think about therapeutic areas, let's just take 2 buckets, broad buckets, right? Let's think about primary care and then specialty medicine. There are pros and cons in the approaches you take with these 2 buckets. Primary care, data is available to a larger depth and breadth, if you will. So you can be smarter in your approaches. But at the same time, that patient opportunity that we talk about is very frequent, meaning an endocrinologist would see an eligible patient, 10 times in a day. So it's not so much about diagnosing that patient, but how do you leverage personalized affinity data to still reach that customer wherever they are with the goal of that awareness side of the funnel, right? When you think specialty medicine, because the opportunities usually are few and far between in terms of, eligible patients presenting in that physician's office, it's not just about awareness, but it's truly in that right moment of opportunity. How do you take that physician down the funnel from awareness to education to truly adoption? And how do you, in a real-time manner, between diagnosis and before that treatment decision is made, truly engage with that HCP to convince them to use your brand versus a standard of care treatment? And how do you leverage channels, not just limited to digital, but also your sales reps, also your external events, in the most streamlined manner, right? So you have to be more creative in some ways with limitations on the data side and how you approach on specialty medicine. But then the approach from primary care, it is big, bold awareness, but how do you apply personalization there?
Yeah. Hemel, I agree with you on all the things you just went through. And I think sitting on the pharma side, it's really important that we pause as a team, an integrated team, and really interrogate what is happening. Like, we have monthly experience optimization rooms where we are bringing not only our internal team, but our agencies, our media agencies, and we're looking at different channels to say, is this working? Is this partner working for us? Are we seeing the right behavioral signals that we are all aimed at targeting, those high value actions being taken? And if they're not, we're pivoting quickly to optimize and move us in that right direction. And also, like, decide maybe this particular channel isn't working for us. And we've looked at our marketing mix models and we're looking at ROI and being okay to say, all right, guys, we've tried it. You need to now pivot and go where it's really making an impact. So just want to agree with everything you said and how we are also trying to take that action in our organization.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And I think something to add to this is leveraging our ability to create constant real-time dashboards, right? We can actually monitor on a weekly basis what our outputs are. Not to say that we have to, I do agree with a fail fast mentality, don't take me wrong. That's kind of how we live in the digital world. But we need to allow enough time for data to accumulate for us to make smart decisions, right? So there's always a balancing act of trying to fail fast. So let's not waste our dollars, but let's not give up on our investments too soon if we haven't really looked at the data in its totality. But our dashboards can be fantastic tools that can be shared broadly, or it can be shared up the management lines to ensure that they also get some visibility. Of course, we'd adapt them because not everyone wants the same way of granularity, but being able to use that data to make real life decisions is super important.
I think what's coming to life for me in this conversation is the evolution we as an industry have been on in two respects. The first, I think everybody has spent a lot of time thinking and talking about, which is the development of our own first party data, right? Like, how are we using our own first party data to enhance our marketing campaigns, deliver more exceptional experiences, and actually move patients, HCPs, customers, whomever they may be, along the journey. Talked a lot about that. The second thing, though, I feel like my personal opinion is maybe we're not quite there yet. We still have some barriers as an industry, is around actually changing the way of working to adapt to this proliferation of first party data, this new way of doing marketing in an Optichannel world, which is how do we very quickly, like I think both Hemel and Angelica mentioned it, more monthly optimization. We have also stood up kind of monthly looking at campaign performance reporting, looking at all of those kinds of the ability to optimize and measure much more quickly. So Hemel, I'm going to put you on the spot maybe and ask you what the biggest barriers to adopting this are, kind of around your clients and what you see with the industry. And maybe some of the ways too that you have seen companies address this challenge and eliminate the barrier.
Yeah, I think surprisingly, it has been adopted a little bit more effectively and efficiently, if you will, with the mid-sized biotechs or the small biotechs. And the reason is they don't have a lot of infrastructure in place, right? So when you're starting from ground up, you have the ability to build a system that is fully plugged in, or work with agencies that are offering an end-to-end sort of system, right? Where you can truly set the right KPIs, think about real-time measurements, train your team from ground up to be able to attune to the idea of, hey, we want to be not just be set in one media plan, which we set up at the beginning of the year, but truly sort of look at monthly metrics and say, hey, this is working, this is not working, train our field reps in a dynamic manner, have a dynamic target list to continuously evaluate opportunities versus just, one review of the target list every quarter or every 6 months, right? So I think it's a little bit easier. When we think about large pharma companies, there is a mix of, there are some leading the wave in terms of building out their systems internally, but haven't fully gotten there yet, where more work needs to be done. And just with larger companies, as we all know, it takes time, right? More cooks in the kitchen, and just coordination takes time. Every decision has to be approved across the board, and alignment and whatnot. And there has been a little bit of, because we are investing internally to build our own omni-channel teams, we don't want to just bring in an end-to-end solution. So we've seen a couple of pharma companies do a good job of bringing in agencies as a stopgap and learn from it, and accumulate data and insights, and build their affinity data sets more impactfully to try to get ahead. But then there are other large pharma companies where they have made some significant changes and move to get to that place, but are still not even close because of just the nature of how large pharma operates, and the time it's going to take them to fully get there, right? Pharma at the end of the day is not in the business of building this technology, connecting the plugs across 25,000 plus platforms and sites and whatnot. They are in the business of selling drugs, right? And that distinction needs to always sort of come through as you think about, if you're launching a brand, do you truly want to wait and build all of this, which is going to take at least a couple years, or do you want to use what exists and then plug it with your internal systems and smart data sets that you already have to truly get ahead of the wave?
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for your perspective on that. The quintessential buy versus build, right? Just coming up in a new area. So, Angelica, I'm going to come to you next. I know in our prep call, you mentioned to us working across various stages of the life cycle, launch, inline. Can you speak to how you think about Optichannel strategies and execution at various stages of the product life cycle? And what tactics or resource allocation have you found to be particularly successful in either place?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I'm going to look at the life cycle in 3 stages: launch, inline brands, and then mature brands. So if you're at a launch phase, the real focus should be about creating awareness and credibility. That means building the right surround sound. You need the omni-channel education for physicians with clear resources for patients, and making sure we're there in those moments where people are first learning about disease states, then therapy. Sometimes you're at the stage where you're building a brand new market that never existed before. And those are factors you need to consider when you're in a launch stage. Also at this stage, it's about that reach, that high impact touch point, and fast feedback loop, so we know what's resonating versus what's not. And then moving down into the life cycle, if you're an inline brand, that's really going to shift to going deep and being very precise. Here, this is where Optichannel is about nurturing ongoing relationships, reinforcing those values that we're building, and identifying those moments where behavior can shift, such as when a new guideline comes out to market, or there's an adherence challenge, or a new competitive agent makes a move and we need to pivot. This is where data triggers and segmentation really come to life. And then finally, in that mature brand, probably you're not getting as much funding internally anymore. Resources need to be allocated to efficiency. You can't be everywhere. It's about prioritizing those channels. It's about prioritizing those experiences and truly driving ROI. Sometimes that means leaning harder into digital as well as peer-to-peer. Other times it's about simplifying the customer journey rather than adding more. So across the life cycle, the mindset evolves from broad awareness to targeted engagement to efficient optimization. And Optichannel isn't one playbook, it's a discipline. I hope that's coming across very clear from all of us. It truly isn't one playbook, it's a discipline that adapts at the stage of the brand and signals and to the signals we're seeing in the market. It needs to be an evolution. It's never going to be static.
Absolutely. And yes, it's coming through that it's a discipline. It's also coming through that it is a reflection of brand strategy. So I hope we have busted the myth that it is separate from strategy, right? Like it should be a reflection of the strategy. It is marketing, and it does evolve as the product evolves. So Hemal, do you have anything to add here?
No, I think I fully agree with all of those comments made, right? And I think it's not so much about, to Angelica's point, it's a mindset, right? And it's not so much about let's stop doing everything we have been doing and shift to Optichannel. It's more about, as you think of launching this brand or as you think of gaining more market share for a mature brand, how do you truly get to that right mix of we want to be everywhere and we want to raise awareness with our customers and we want that, reach and frequency model, but how can you complement what your traditional media agency is doing with a hyper targeted personalized Opti-channel campaign that helps you then pull through down the funnel from, hey, this is raising awareness, I'm going to, in that right moment of opportunity, complement the awareness to truly bring home, that prescription. So what is that right balance looks very different for every brand and brand strategic goals and where the brand is from life cycle perspective. But if you get that right mix, then that's the recipe for success, or that's where magic happens, if you will.
Yeah, love that.
Angelica, you were so eloquent with the way you described that. The only thing I would like to add to that is that yes, where in its life cycle the brand is really matters, but also pretty much everything you said could be reflected in our customers' journeys, right? Because if they're new to this space, if they're new to this, if it's the first time engaging with us, if they have moved, they already know the brand and they're utilizing it, but we want to maximize their utilization. Everything you said, when we think of it from a brand perspective, can also be at the human level. And that's why I really think our customer journeys are one of the most important tools we have and often underappreciated. We focus on critical success factors and we hyper index on those, and then we create content that's based on those. That doesn't necessarily always get reflected in the customer journey. And those moments that matter, I can't remember if it was Angelica or Maria that brought up the idea of moments of matter, but in ensuring that we individualize our content to those moments that matter based on where that customer is in their journey and their maturity, that will truly change how successful we are with our communications to them.
That's right.
So Pedro, let's keep on that line of thinking, because one of the other things we talked about in the prep call is that we are all speaking to people, right? Like we are marketing or engaging with people, and they are engaging with our company. Our companies, big, small, medium, all have multiple functions. We don't always, I think some of us probably do a better job than others at integrating the different functions. And so how do you think about that? Where have you found success? And can you share what specific processes or triggers work best, specifically around field and marketing integration? And then how do you think about that beyond maybe the commercial functions, thinking about medical, et cetera?
Yeah. So you've hit on one of my passions, right? And I think to your point, it will vary company by company. In a small company, per se, in a situation where you have a single product, no matter what function you're talking to within that organization, they're going to talk about the one product or the one disease state or whatever their focus is. So in that case, integration across functions makes absolute sense, and trying to divvy it up within functions doesn't. When you talk about large organizations where you have multiple competing brands, often in the same business unit, you might have competing brands. Because let's talk about large oncology portfolios, for example. when it comes to your typical long tail customer that sees 20 different tumor types in a month, then you might have brands competing for attention. So you really need that really strong orchestration tool that allows you to estimate which product should be delivering which message at what time for that customer. And that can often, that bringing in functions into that conversation can make it even more complicated, right? But back to the idea of integrating across functions and how we do it well. And first thing, compliance, 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 best friends will always be there to help us. But working closely with our compliance partners to make the right business rules. And those business rules are truly what changes the game, because then you can start thinking about how can you use content engagement from our medical affairs hubs to get our fields to react. And it might not be our sales team, right? It might be our nurse educators, for example, going out. And because they're doing the dosing and administration training, content that exists somewhere else on dosing and administration can be shared compliantly. That'll depend company by company. You might actually want to make that part of your triggers program on whichever CRM tools you're using to ensure that those field individuals are aware of this content being digested, right? And the true goes for, that's pretty much also what happened when it comes to commercial engagement. We all think that our campaigns are the best, and of course they are. All of our campaigns are the best ones ever created. But the reality is that not everybody wants to engage with that shiny, well-designed, well-researched messaging platform that we typically use for our branded sites. Some people want a more scientific look and feel that they might get from other areas, such as our medical affairs hubs, right? So let's create those business rules that allow us to kind of go, well, if they haven't engaged with our commercial content for 3 months, do we want them to not keep engaging, or do we want to send them somewhere else? Make sure that they become part of someone else's customer list to ensure that from a 360 point of view, we are engaging all of our target lists with the right message at the right time. That's what I would have to say about this, because the main goal is that it's complicated, but the more we can do it, the better.
Absolutely. And there was actually a question in the chat, maybe that I'll put to Hemal, that I think you started to kind of touch on, Pedro, which is not everything can be laddered to ROI, and you don't always have, the signals might not match ROI. Certainly medical, you can't ladder to ROI, but in these kind of monthly engagement meetings or with the cadence with which you're looking at the data, Hemal, this is for you. How do you use leading indicators to make your optimization decisions, particularly if they're not kind of laddered to ROI?
Yeah, so I think you're right in that for launch brands, you can use the lagging indicators of success, and you have to be smart about it, right? Because sometimes the leading indicators tell you that, hey, directionally, this is working and it just needs more time. And depending on the channel we are talking about, banner ads versus custom programs versus, sales rep visits, you have to allow for that channel and that campaign to mature enough before you say, hey, I haven't seen a lagging indicator of success, so let's make a switch. That said, depending on your campaign goals, the leading indicators that you set forth have to be appropriately sort of, measured, right? In other words, if you're running a medical campaign, it's not just about prescription lift, which you can do with medical affairs compliantly, but it's about, tracking, leveraging technology appropriately, wherein we have done things like we can measure in an ongoing real-time basis if physicians are searching for those scientific education terms or those messages more often, if they are going to specific scientific websites more often prior to the campaign versus post-campaign, right? So you can start tracking some of those elements. Pedro had originally brought up, quality visits, some of the other deeper metrics from just website perspective. You have to be smart about the KPIs that you're setting based off of those campaign goals to ensure that your leading indicators are giving you a pretty strong sense for whether something is working or not, and then you wait for those lagging indicators to appropriately follow. Now, in some areas, you can look at lagging indicators rather quickly and start making those decisions. But again, it's not one size that fits all, which I've heard all three of you say through the session. You truly have to be very strategic and smart about what you do and appropriately leverage not just the different data sets available, but stitch the data points in the right manner without breaching HIPAA or any compliance barriers, as well as appropriately leverage technology that is now available in pharma and, measure at the right cadence.
Yeah. Maria, I'd like to jump in just for a moment. Let's say you're on the pharma side and you truly feel like you don't have enough data. If you have a website and you're working with social media partners or you're working with media partners reaching HCPs or consumers, you have enough data. It's about finding how to utilize that data. And I'll give you just some real life examples. Simply starting with your Google Analytics data can tell you so much. Where are people coming into your experience? Do you have a gap in drivers driving to that ultimate high value action that you really want to get them to? Maybe you want them to download a doctor discussion guide, but guess what? The team doesn't even have a driver getting them to that. So how is the customer going to find that doctor discussion guide? So you have data that maybe you aren't aware of that you should be tapping into. And Google Analytics is the most simplest one to tap into. And then your media partners, they have a wealth of data on your customers. What time of day are they engaging? It's good to know. Are they engaging in those white coat moments if you're an HCP, or in those blue jean moments? And if you're a consumer, what can you learn about your consumer? Ask your partners for some personas about the people who are engaging in your investments. You'd be surprised at how much more knowledge and data you truly do have to start to make optimizations and knowledge. So for those of you who are participating today, if you're feeling like, I just don't have data, you have data. It's just about using that data in a very smart way.
Thank you so much, Angelica. There was actually a question that was submitted in the chat that was pretty similar. I think you just answered half of it, which is like, how do you find data from unconventional sources if you don't have it? But then similarly, we actually, to your point, have a lot more than we think. So how do we dispel that myth? And I was actually going to kind of bridge to you anyway, Angelica, because we're talking about creating unified customer experiences. And I know that every company has kind of their own, what they believe is the secret sauce of how to be set up and resourced for success in this space. So I'm curious if you can speak to the role of center of excellences versus kind of more brand embedded teams. Sure. And then maybe pulling on that previous question as well, like, how do you actually socialize with people? Yes, we have the data. Yes, we can do things with them. How have you kind of influenced that in the past?
Yeah, so I'll start with the first part of the question, which is how we as a matrix organization really factor out centers of excellence and then integrated embedded brand teams. So the truth is, silos are never going to disappear just because we want them to. What really makes a difference is having clear roles, shared goals, and mechanisms to connect those dots through the organization. And so I see centers of excellence as the enablers. They set the standards, they bring the tools, they bring the best practices really well above the brand. And it's not just for media, these centers of excellence, but they could be centers of excellence for how you engage social influencers, how you start to bring in AI into your organization. Those centers of excellence set the frameworks so that we can get to good Optichannel engagement. Wow, your integrated, branded, brand embedded teams, this is where the execution lives. These teams, they understand the customer context, they understand the competitive pressures, and the nuances of their therapeutic area. We are the closest to the field and the data. And where I've seen it work best is when there's a true handshake between centers of excellence and the integrated embedded brand teams. Between those two, we're unstoppable. So this way we avoid those random acts of marketing. We also get to avoid cookie cutter experiences, and we really get to meet the customers where they are. So it's not to dissolve swim lanes or to dissolve silos, because these are always going to happen. We're very focused on our particular work. But because we can create bridges between them and the customer gets a seamless experience, even when behind the scenes there's multiple teams contributing to it. That's the key, is you've got to create that seamless experience.
More seamlessness, less random acts of marketing.
Yes.
I wrote that down.
I want that. I want that in a shirt. No, and it goes back to that whole idea of we plan together and we execute separately, right? And in that planning and that strategy decision-making point, that's when we have to be, again, I think I've said this a couple of times, taking us from our typical key success factors and bringing it down to journey, bringing that down to next best action, right? Because what is the next best action we want our customers to take will determine what kind of content we need to provide that customer. And then that goes down to the quality visits measure. And it's at that back piece where we kind of bring it back together, because we should, if possible, depending on the organization, be measuring everything in how it synergizes. So we plan together, we execute separately, but hopefully in the back end of that, it comes together back again at the data level.
Awesome. Hemal, I'm gonna ask you to weigh in a little bit around trade-offs. We've touched on it at multiple points throughout this discussion, but really, as pharma, we sometimes have the propensity to want to be everywhere. And we have lots of very well-intentioned individuals who think that we need to be constantly in that actually launch awareness stage that Angelica talked about, versus being a little bit more precise and a lot more pragmatic and focused. So can you speak to how you have seen companies approach trade-offs? What is standing in the way of excellence? What is working well? And how would you kind of rate our maturity there as an industry?
Fantastic question, Maria. Thank you for asking. Something you said in your introduction that resonated really well with me is, I think now as an industry, we are at this place of how do we do less with less versus, any other way, let's just say, that we used to approach the marketing side of things, right? And when we think about less with less and making trade-offs, it's the mindset has shifted from let's stop doing an email campaign, or let's not have any custom media programs, or can we afford a sales team to be able to truly execute upon this launch in a cost efficient manner. It's more to do with where are your customers going, and can you be personalized in your outreach to significantly reduce your media waste, or to make your field force smarter by giving them real-time insights and feeds so they know where to go, when to go, what to deliver. And we are all talking about being streamlined. How do you connect the dots from real-time data perspective, where those journeys are getting delivered to that customer in that streamlined manner, so that you're driving cost efficiencies by having the dots connect across all of these channels, right? So I think it's more trade-offs in terms of, instead of going after your entire target list with all of the different channels just because these channels are available to you, versus thinking about, hey, there is 20% of my target list that is going to give me the highest bang for the buck with endemic display and programmatic. And within endemic display, these are the platforms or websites that are going to give me the highest bang for the buck. So I'm going to structure a strategic bottoms-up media strategy and media plan, which will cater to these 20% across these couple channels. But then then the next 10% are going to resonate better with emails and talking to my reps. So I'm going to be smarter about doing that and spending appropriately for that next 10%. And then evolution of all of this, right? You can be stuck in one plan through the course of the year. And I know we spoke about real-time measurement a couple of times, but how can you set up your plans and strategies to be dynamic? And how do you coach your teams to take in the data in an ongoing basis and say, hey, look, based on the information and the facts we had back in January or late last year through the brand planning cycle, this was the right plan, but some of this is not working. I need to be adaptable and I need to quickly make that switch to continue to drive towards the highest bang for the buck. The other element of all of this is, and Pedro has touched upon it beautifully, right, a couple of times through the conversation, is all around, it's not just the channel mix and making trade-offs with channels and, a strategy for your media and your reps and where they go, but also content is a big part of it. And how do you do less with less from content perspective? Because when you start thinking about personalization and next best action and whatnot, one question we often get across all our clients is, how much content do you need? And do we need to develop, 50 different pieces of banner ads to be able to truly deliver personalized journeys? And it's not that, right? We discussed how it's about that right moment of opportunity, what's going to truly resonate, coupled with how can you tweak that content, very slight, like just minor tweaks to your contents and journeys, and the flow of that journey can allow you to reach personalization. And you would not need 50 banners. 5 banners or 6 banners that you usually used to develop is still going to get you to that personalization goal, right? So I think the education around just how do you leverage content and do less with less on the content side, along with the channel strategy and targeting that we discussed, that together is going to help us get to that ideal goal. And Maria, you said it again earlier in this call, we are not there yet as an industry. A lot of times when we engage with clients, there is a lot of education period that we end up spending just trying to educate the client on, hey, you don't need that much content. Hey, you don't need millions of dollars from media perspective. Just a couple 100,000 can still allow you to get to that personalization, because you're breaking down your sort of media strategic plans appropriately based off of where your customers are going. So I think that education is still going to take a little bit of time, but the industry is thinking in that right direction. And, now we have an offering that allows you to get there. So we are all collectively trying to get there, which is the good news.
We're so choiceful in the way we deploy our field teams. But when it comes to digital content, we often lose that choicefulness, right? And the reality is that we know so much about our customers, whether it's the data that the field is giving us about our customers and where they are on their journey, or their digital behavior data that is telling us where they are in their journey. But we have to continue to individualize to be successful, but we don't have to be everywhere to individualize. Let's think about, particularly in the consumer space, every social media platform has to be utilized. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense. The wrong demographic, there's not the right demographic isn't on that platform. So why would you be talking in that platform? But it is there are other factors, sometimes management wants to see something and you deliver based on those desires. But data-driven decisions is, I think, where we all have come together and we've really aligned to. And if the data is not supporting it, it shouldn't be done. And someone else needs to justify why force it in.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm chuckling because I've built a reputation on some of my teams for being a bad representation of my age and demographics. I'm not on TikTok. So if you're targeting me, don't use TikTok. But yes, agree, should not be everywhere to everyone and try to do everything. So we have a few more questions, and we're going to have time for some questions. It's being moderated by the Reuters team. So just another ask of everyone to please put your questions in the chat. We'll try to get to as many as we can. But Hemal, just on this idea of, we've talked a lot about the how and the processes internally, but I also want to touch on externally some of these emerging technologies, innovation. What should pharmaceutical marketers be preparing for?
So I think we have to get away from the idea of doing too much in some ways, wherein, when you think technology now slowly and, already, I would say, you're beginning to see a lot of technology platforms becoming available. What folks shouldn't do is jump to bring in 5 different platforms and say, hey, wow, now I have access to all of it. So my strategy is going to be, or execution of the strategy is going to be best in class. You need one platform that connects the dots across your data ecosystem, across, deployment, across measurement, and you need to appropriately learn from it and continue to go from there. If you try to bring in too many different platforms, too many different data sets, and try to patch them all together, it's going to be honestly disastrous, right? For lack of any other better terminology. I think from trend perspective, the last couple of weeks have been a little interesting on the content side of world and DTC advertisements and whatnot. With FDA warning letters being issued, we have been reminded as an industry to be a little bit more cautious about what we put out there, about just the responsibility we have towards our patients. And I think the flip side of all of that is, as an industry, it's also time for us to take a stand and say, hey, collectively, this feels right because we should be educating our patients. Otherwise, how will they learn about this, right? And how do you approach some of those discussions in the broader landscape and try to get to that right mix where you're educating responsibly and not, taking away all of that DTC advertisements overnight? I think that's where it'll be interesting to, observe and participate appropriately to get to that right balance. So I would say from trends perspective, those are a couple things that sort of come to mind, both in terms of do's and don'ts.
Great, thank you. I think we'll do one more prepared question, and we'll do this one kind of rapid fire for all of the panelists. For everybody who's on the call today or who's watching the call once it's recorded, we're here because we want to progress our Optichannel journey, and we want to enhance our effectiveness. So what advice do you have for those on the call today? What's one thing that they can do today to get them going? Maybe we'll start with Pedro and then go to Angelica and Hemel.
Yep. To me, it's the easy win, which actually addresses a question that came up in the chat as well, is making sure that your next best actions and your quality visits are so hand in hand that they are the leading indicators for success of your brand. That allows you to best measure the impact that your digital campaigns are having, that your digital content is creating, even some of the outcomes of personal behaviors can lead to those quality visits as well. And that in its own right, if you align that very clearly with your brand plan or your corporate plan or whatever you have in your organization, you'll be able to provide valuable data to all of your cross-functional teams. And then it'll become less of a question of we've all heard this before. People still today questioning the value of omnichannel, when the reality is all we're trying to do is get our customers through that journey. And because of the activities that we've done, we have progressed them further down that journey. And we can show that through a clear measurement plan that ties those two things together.
Thank you. Hemel?
I think from quick wins perspective, agree with everything Pedro said. Start connecting the dots between the data set that exists internally, right? Angelica provided a couple very strong examples of, hey, it's not like you don't have data. It's just the belief that you don't have data, right? If you just start patching the dots across some of the data your insights and analytics team is buying, and then some of the campaign engagement data, whether it's, website visits and whatnot, or just leading indicators, you can start seeing directional trends and get a good sense for what's working, what's not working, and go from there. Or reach out to Pharma for IQ. We can help you build a pilot and some quick wins there.
Awesome. Well, thank you. We have about 7 minutes or so we probably have time for a couple of questions. I'm going to do my best to to try to address as many as we can in that time. So there's a question here around rare disease, and I would put even some later line oncology or smaller oncologic populations in this camp as well, which is how do you ensure a more personalized experience when most journeys are different? Experts may not always recognize their patients' unmet needs or fully understand the disease, evolutions in standard of care, et cetera. And how is that different from larger disease states in primary care or chronic disease? So any takers for that question? Pedro, can I count on you for that one? Maybe Hemel?
Hey, well, I'll let you go first.
Okay, happy to. I would say that's where it starts with understanding your customers and understanding the patient journey behind, what you're going after. And that's where it's not one size fits all. That's why it's not about spray and pray and using every channel that's at your fingertips to bombard these customers with a bunch of awareness campaigns. When you're thinking rare, a physician is going to be presented with that patient opportunity once in 6 months, once in a year, or sometimes once every 2 years, right? In that moment, it is difficult for that physician to remember the banner ad you served them from 2 months ago, even if they engage with that banner ad, or remember an email that went out to them 6 months ago, right? So how do you truly capitalize in that moment of opportunity, whether you're using real world data signals and on a daily, weekly basis from claims, lab, EHR aggregators, or whether you are building a predictive model because data is a challenge in your therapeutic space or for your indications. But you truly need to just take a step back, look at your patient journey, understand the customer base, and get into the minds of those customers to say, hey, are they truly going to remember this message? And is this truly going to resonate with them to convert their behavior from believing in a standard of care treatment to now something new, right? And sometimes it is about, hey, for this specific subsegment of a customer base, I need to truly start that customer with educating them about a specific rare indication or a mutation, and then go into branded messaging, because the branded messaging is just not going to work, right? And that's why I think throughout this discussion, we're talking about personalization, but still the goal is less with less, right? So it's not personalization again in terms of, hey, we have to build 50 different messages, but truly understand your customer base, use that data, take a step back to truly build a strategy that is best suited for the needs of your customers versus I can do it all, so I'm just going to do it all, right? Pedro, anything further to add there?
Yeah, if I understood the question, it felt like it came more from the consumer patient side of things, maybe, and that's where my head went, and that's when I really go straight into like microsegmentation to personalize as much as possible, right? Because understanding what type of patient is engaging with what type of content enables you to replicate that, for example, in zip codes with certain social demographics that might preferentially need reinforcement of a copay support program than, for example, in other demographics. Yes, agree 100%. It is about personalization. And in those cases that we can't personalize because we don't have NPI level data, we might have some level of IP level data, but obviously IP addresses are limited by most people have multiple IP addresses based on where they are on that day. So it's really using those microsegments, which again come from a lot of the data that we already have. And these are all public data sets or purchasable data sets that we can utilize. So really using that microsegmentation approach from behaviors and digital demographics, all of this data that is large data that is already available will really help deliver on that promise of being able to take a customer down the journey.
Thank you. All right, we probably have time for one more question. So I really like this question. I think that the analytics person in me likes this question that has come in, but what do you think of as the gold standard for comparing effectiveness across different messages and platforms? And then adding for good measure, we accept that old-fashioned what some people would probably call vanity metrics, like clicks and opens, isn't measuring anything too relevant. So do you have a way of measuring gold standard? Go ahead, Angelica.
I think you need to be doing an A/B test, and they need to be in the market at the same time to really understand content effectiveness. Whether you're doing an email, maybe you're testing the A/B, one headline in one email and one headline in another to see which one gets those vanity metrics the most. That's the simplest way to get content effectiveness. But if you really want to get even deeper, you need to know if is your content driving that behavior change that you ultimately set forward in your strategy plans. But gold standard to me is A/B tests, like trying to figure out what's working, what's not, and having two run at the same time.
I was going to say, just to add my perspective, that it really is about journey movement, right? Like if you've got the two things out, what is actually progressing them along the journey, and we can measure that as we think about how they're moving through from awareness to consideration, et cetera. And as the brand lead with P&L responsibility for my marketing campaigns, for an inline brand, not a launch brand, for me, it's about ROI, but we can't always trace ROI, as we were talking about earlier. So with that, I think we'll come to a close. Thank you, everyone, for joining. This webinar will be available on demand after the presentation is complete. But Pedro, Angelica, Hemel, thank you so much for your thoughts. It was a great discussion. I took back some nuggets, and thanks to the Reuters team, and thank you all for joining. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.